Thanks for watching. Today's video is about how to remove rust from a firearm. We'll be using a semi-compact 9mm as an example, and this model is a Taurus Millennium G2 PT111. Now, this gun was accidentally exposed to moisture when it was left in the trunk of a vehicle over the winter. The damage is extensive as the rust has eaten through the finish on the slide, the clip release, and on some of the sights. Now, before we get started, make sure that your gun is unloaded. Go ahead and take out the clip. Make sure there's no live rounds in the slide or in the chamber. Just double check and make sure that you're doing everything safely. Go ahead and break down your gun, remove the slide, and really kind of isolate and identify where your rust is occurring. You want to know what you're up against, so make sure you really look over the inner workings of your gun to identify any sort of hidden or internal rust. In this video, we'll use a few materials. You'll need an extreme duty gun oil like Lucas makes. This runs about $7 to $10 at your local gun shop. You'll need about 2 liters of cola. And you won't need this much steel wool, but you will need a fine grade steel wool, a Tupperware container or 2, and of course your firearm. Start off with a clean, dry Tupperware container, or any container that has enough volume to accommodate your gun and its parts. Go ahead and pour in the cola until it's deep enough to submerge your gun and its parts. Any kind of cola will do as long as it's not diet. And in this circumstance, the cola is acting like a solvent, which will react to the rust and any sort of gunk that's built up on your gun. Go ahead and submerge your gun and its parts for about 10 minutes, and you can see the film is forming on the surface of the cola. Go ahead and use a second Tupperware container as a water bath. Remove the guns from the cola and submerge them in water. The purpose of this is to remove any sort of excess stickiness or excess cola. You don't want that to cause any sort of nastiness in your gun. You should be able to see a film on the surface of the cola from its reaction. Now, before we use any sort of steel wool or gun oil or anything like that, we're going to want to completely dry off the gun of any residual moisture. You really want to look for this moisture, that way it doesn't cause any further rust issues. You can use a microfiber cloth, a terry cloth. In my circumstance, I'm using an old dish rag that I don't care about. That way, if I get any stains or anything like that, if I ruin it, it's not a big deal for me to just throw it away. Once you're certain that your gun is dry, you're now ready for your steel wool. I'm using a superfine quadruple 0 grade steel wool. Don't go any more coarse than 000, you might ruin your finish. Go ahead and glove up. I like using garden gloves with rubber on one side, that way I don't splinter my hands. And what we're gonna do is very similar to a wet sanding technique where we apply the gun oil in small amounts to the affected areas. We take our steel wool and lightly brush in the direction of the steel. You don't wanna go against the grain of the finish. Here's a final look at the before. Just one last glimpse of what the gun looked like before with all the rust. And now we can take a look at our progress after. This is just after a quick brushing with the steel wool. You can see the rust was progressive and it actually damaged my finish. Your next step is to take a dry, clean cloth and just wipe off any rust, wipe off any debris, any sort of metal shavings, that sort of thing. And then do one final small light coat of gun oil all over all the parts. That way you can preserve your gun and its finish and avoid rust ever again. Considering how progressive the rust was in the beginning of this video, I'm pretty content with how this turned out. Now, it doesn't look brand new, but I'm just glad that I was able to stop the rust in its tracks. And the takeaway and the lesson from this whole situation is that you should frequently clean your gun. You should frequently apply a thin layer of gun oil to protect its finish in the metal.